Welcome back to the program, and it's Good Morning Nigeria this Monday, and it's happening live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our conversation this morning, just to remind you, we have two topics, and the first one, which we will begin presently, is on the military-civil relations, and I'm sure you know why this is very important for us today. And the second one is another equally very important conversation on the labor strike, which kicks off this Monday morning. But first, let's listen to the background report by Oyeyemi Ajayi on military-civilian relations.
The primary responsibility of soldiers is to protect territorial integrity of their country, fight against external and sometimes internal aggression against the country, sometimes using technology to help defeat the enemy. This is a practical phenomenon globally, and that is why countries hold soldiers in high esteem due to the nature of their jobs. They are usually ready to die for their countries, and Nigerian soldiers are not in any way different. Now of concern is when these set of people now become the target of some aggressors, exposing the security architecture of the country. The reoccurring and appalling killing of Nigerian soldiers at different points in time while on national assignment have indeed brought shivers down the spine of many who feel such acts threaten the sovereignty of the country. Many sad instances of such cannot be forgotten in a hurry, and the latest remains the death of at least 4 soldiers who were killed when gunmen attacked them at Abuja State in the southeastern part of the country. The hoodlums, numbering about 15, attacked soldiers at a military checkpoint in Obikabia Junction in the commercial city in the morning after enforcing a sit-at-home order declared by the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, across the southeast to mark the Biafra Day, which is celebrated annually in the region. The gunmen were said to have burnt the patrol vehicle of these soldiers. Worthy of note is also the death of 6 soldiers in Shiroro district of Niger State after being ambushed while fighting armed criminal gangs on the 22nd of May this year. The largest rural Shiroro area is a known enclave of the bandit leader Dogogide, who forged an alliance with Islamic State-linked jihadists. Nigerian military was said to be fighting these criminal gangs in the region, who raided villages, kill and abduct residents before this ugly incident occurred. The brutal attack of some soldiers by yet-to-be-identified hoodlums at the Banex Plaza was one sad incident that many kept remembering, with some questioning the response for backup when emergencies occur and why well-trained military personnel have become prey for criminal gangs or hoodlums who have lesser knowledge and training to capture and eliminate easily. Our guest will be answering some of these probing questions on Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
Thank you, Yemi Ajayi, for that background report. And joining us now is Dr. Kabil Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert. You are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Although we are still expecting Dr. Monday Michaels Ashibogo, so we're expecting that he will join us in this conversation. Claire.
That's nice. Yeah, thank you, Demola. And we also have joining us via Zoom, regular contributor to Good Morning Nigeria, General John Temlong. And General Temlong is First Commander, Multinational Joint Task Force. He also former President, Alumni Association of National Defense College and Security Consultant. Well, thank you very much, General Temlong. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good to see you too. Good morning, Nigeria. It's a pleasure to be here.
With you, General Temlong, and because, you know, being a former military person, in your years of experience, can you recall this sort of military civil relations before the Fourth Republic? What has been the military civil relations before now?
Well, thank you very much. I think it's quite disturbing what is happening now. Before now, during our time, there was absolute respect for the armed forces. You will never see people being attacked or soldiers being attacked and killed gruesomely the way they are doing by the very citizens that they are protecting, that they are.
No. We don't want to start like this. Network, you must be good to us today. You must be good to us today. I hope you're not also going on strike. General Temlang, we'll come back to you if your connection with us is right, and engineers are working at it right away. So let's bring the conversation to the studio here. And I know that regular analyst, of course, Dr. Kabira Damu, would want to weigh in on that very first question that Demola asked. Maybe you want to talk about it before I ask my question.
Yes, I would say civil-military relationships have been checkered. There were periods when it was really good, especially, I would say, in the late 70s, 60s into 70s. But then the more the military got involved in internal security, unfortunately, the more we saw a reduction in perhaps the trust between the military and the people. And for the simple reason that in all essence, the military is an instrument for the implementation of public policy. So where those public policies are seen to not reflect the wishes and aspirations of the people, unfortunately you see a reaction for the people. So the more, of course, military rule became ingrained, the more the military became involved in internal security, the more you saw people's reaction sometimes to the role of the military, and of course the military being targets of attack because of the grievances that the people. Now over time, I think the military too realized that, and then the concept of civil-military relations also became advanced. Studies have been carried out, theories have been put forward to explain civil-military relations and to also identify the triggers. Perhaps in the course of our conversation we'll talk about that. And so what happened is the military itself started institutionalizing civil-military relations. So now you go to the defense headquarters, you see a civil-military CIMIC department. You go to theater commands like Operation Hadinkai, you see a whole department responsible for civil-military relations as a way of improving the relationships. But so like I said at the beginning, it has been checkered. And of course, the more, for instance, people feel they are not getting what they want from the government, the more the military is a target, unfortunately, of people's grievances. Not necessarily because the military has done anything wrong, but because people see the military as a reflection of the state.
Yes, I thank you for that clarification, because I wanted you to clarify that. And then you talked about military-civil relation being a specialized department in some countries. We do have that also in Nigeria, and I dare say it's very functional and very, very active, because I have also been part of their media engagement activities. But let us talk about ingraining the military into our internal security, which probably is the root of the grievances, of public grievances and all that. It wasn't, I mean, we are celebrating 25 years of unbroken democracy, so it's not intention of the military. I don't think so, and I don't think, I mean, there are no evidence to suggest that the military is intending to, take over
the role of the police.
Exactly. So there was, you had sequences that led to the, to military intervening. So I'm just wondering, where is the root of the grievances, public grievances against the military?
All right. I listed down a couple of things. I kind of thought about where we are, and as a theorist, I asked myself, what are the reasons? So what I have, and I'll quickly mention them. Number one, our history as a country, pre-colonial times, and then the first coup in 1966, and what followed after that coup. And then, of course, subsequent coups until where we are. Number two is our traditions as a people. How do we respond to authority? Of course, there are differences in culture. What you find in some parts of northern Nigeria is very different from what you find in some parts of southern Nigeria. That's important. Number three is mentality. Our mentality. And if that too is changing over time, what used to be and what is at the moment. The average youth is influenced by social media, which I'll talk about shortly, the role of the media. Then legislative framework. We've had a long history. Like you mentioned, this is the longest republic that we've had. And our legislature has grown. And we've seen some, I would say, positive development as a result of that. But before now, we haven't really seen that. Then number 5, I think, or 4, domestic politics. Has our politics been transparent? Has it reflected the wishes of the average Nigerian? Then in continuation is international and regional security context. What happens geopolitics around us in affects our military and how we see our military. Not too long ago in Zimbabwe, after a coup, we saw how people came out and were celebrating the military. A lot of young Nigerians saw that and asked themselves critical questions. What is happening in Nigeria? How come you don't have that? So it influences the way they behave to the military. And then, of course, the military's role in society. Their own perception of their role and then what has been instructed for them to do. There are two different things. There are professional militaries, focus, and then there is the instruction or directive given to the military. If you look at the Renewed Hope agenda, there are rules and responsibilities of the military embedded in that. And then in continuation is the image of the military profession in the public mind. How do we as Nigerians see that military profession? And then, of course, in continuation is the personal characteristics of the military professional himself. How does he portray his characteristics to the public? Does he see the gun he's carrying as an instrument to force the society, or does he see it as an instrument to protect the society? And then, of course, lastly is the role of the media. What does the media portray the military to be? So these are some of the issues that have influenced civil-military relations over time in Nigeria. And for each one of them, if we pick, there are, of course, issues that have arisen over time. Let me pick the last one, the media. If you divide the media into social media and then conventional media, I would say on the whole, the conventional media has done quite well in portraying the kind of military that we as Nigerians would want. For social media, not necessarily. Of course, the social media has a role, especially as someone who operates in the intelligence cycle. I know the role of social media. But there are often times when the social media breeds the three, I would say, devils of modern day society: misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Where that happens and the target of that is the military, then the consequence is that the trust that the average Nigerian has of the military is depleted completely. And sadly, that is where we are at the moment. Some of the images that was shown in your report were from the social media. And I doubt if there is a Nigerian that will see those images and be happy about them. But unfortunately, if you now tie it to the other factors that I mentioned, the average young person who perhaps doesn't know what a lot of us know about the military, the role they played in preserving our nationhood as an example, and sees that media and then remembers something like NSAS, all he or she would think is the effect of the military in suppressing their rights. And so he sees the military as a target of some of the attacks, unfortunately. So all of these factors are at play, and I think there has to be a conscious effort, not just by the military, but by the state as a whole, to now address these factors so that that instrument, like I want to emphasize, the military is an instrument of public policy implementation. What the military does is what we as Nigerians ask them to do. If the government tells them to do A, that's what they will do. So we as the people need to realize that we need them. They have a role to play in preserving our nationhood. And the more we subject them to that kind of attack, the more that capacity and capability that they have for doing it is reduced tremendously.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kabil, for highlighting some of these major causes of this strain in military and civil relations in the country. I would have asked you more questions on it, but I think we have General Temlong back. Maybe we should just allow you to complete your thought on the first questions on what has been the situation, the military-civil relations before the Fourth Republic, so that we can carry on from there.
Well, thank you very much. You know, if it were in those days, Operation Second 11 should have been activated by now, and the armed forces would have been providing some of these basic national security assets for the people who wouldn't be having power failure. The armed forces would have taken over and be giving us power. They would have taken over the control of the airport and uninterrupted flights. Our waterworks would have been taken over by the engineers to provide, so that people will not suffer from the effects of this strike. However, these were things that were in place before. I'm sure some of our colleagues might not know that the military was trained in those areas to provide what they used to call Operation Second 11. But going back, we don't even think to understand is that when we were growing as young men, in fact, even before we entered school, part of the teachings that the society taught you was that the crown that a policeman, a soldier wears on his cap was representing the sound of the queen, and that crown should not touch the ground. So whenever a policeman or a military man is seen and somebody is trying to even wrestle him, the whole society will go to help that military or policeman to stand still and arrest the person who is assaulting him, because that crown should not touch the ground. And when we got into primary school, it was reinforced by the teachings of civics education. What good citizens are, what bad citizens, what passive citizens are, and what your responsibility are as to the state. So going forward, there was a lot of respect, even for the civil servants. Anybody who was carrying the authority, teachings were bring the argument of the military staying long, performing. Are you hearing me? Yeah, when people bring this argument of the military. Hello?
Continue.
You are hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so along the line, when people bring the argument that the military have stayed long in internal security operations, they have forgotten too that even in Britain, which colonized us, the crisis in Northern Ireland took over 30 years, and the military was deployed there for over 30 years. The Nigerian military has not been deployed for over 30 years since they returned to democracy in 1999. Basically, what is wrong is that there is a breakdown of the social order. People have a different understanding of what the state is and what their responsibility to the state is. People see democracy or freedom as synonymous to lawlessness on the pillar of law and order. And so if you allow people to start doing what they are doing, then there is something wrong. Generally, because we politicize crimes. Crimes have been politicized. People do not speak out against crime. And unfortunately, those who are in authority and those who are elders, elder statesmen like me and the rest, condone crime because they are afraid to speak out, to being seen as those who are anti the people. But being anti-people, when you are speaking the truth, is not anti-people, because you are trying to rein in the society for you to get back the society from criminals. What is happening is absolute and pure criminality. Those men planned their operation like in Abuja. They came out from the neighboring community from that area. They cannot say they do not know them. And when they were planning, and nobody could even hit the military that, look, you are going to be attacked. So I think there is something wrong, that we must take back our society from criminals. These excuses we are giving that the military have stayed so long. I don't think so, unless you have not seen what crisis is all about. When I was commandant in Zaria, the moment crisis started in Zaria, the whole of my barracks could not even contain the people in Sabongari because they ran and found a shelter within the military. We have problems because overnight the elite are benefiting from the criminality and the lawlessness that is going on in this country. People do not want an organized society, do not want the rule of law, because that is the only way they can fleece this country in a way that they are doing now. But if you have this that is
Yes, General Temlong, we will just keep you on hold for now, and let's hope that again we will,
the network
connections,
issue
yes,
be resolved.
will be favorable to us today, and not disrupt our conversations with you. But thank you for the issues that you have raised. You've made a point that the fact that the military, is involved in internal security, it's not overdue and should not be seen as something that should, which you don't necessarily agree, Dr. Kabiru. But again, if we look at, someone said that if we must repair or restore military civilian relations, coded relations, we must really look at the root cause of, and you gave us a number of factors that could affect that. General Temlong has said, look, the fact that they have been ingrained in our internal security is not a cause. For him, you don't agree. But another person, another opinion is the issue of power and identity, the wide gap between power and identity. And if you consider the fact that those who unleash this mayhem on our fighting men are not really, ordinary Nigerians like you, I, and Demoda, but major actors, non-state actors who are aggrieved with the nation state. Could this be speaking to issues of power devolution, issues of criminal justice, issues of even constitutional, rejigging?
Definitely. The point I tried to make at the beginning is that there are several factors. We can't just hold on to one factor. So even, for instance, when I say the military's prolonged intervention, as it were, in politics is one of the causes, it does not mean the others are not as important. Perhaps at a point, if we can give them weights to determine which one is more important, but that hasn't been done yet. It would require a study to identify which one is more significant. So yes, not too long ago, I was invited to the launch of results of a research that was conducted on identity-based conflict. And the Southeast featured prominently in that identity-based conflict. Now, there are grievances that some of them perceived, others real, that exist in the Southeast. Now, the irony is this: the military is not the cause of those grievances. They are deployed to go and maintain quote and unquote law and order and provide some form of stability for governance to happen. And because those grievances are not addressed, the non-state actors see the military as a target for their attacks, simply to thwart that effort to maintain law and order. Because what do they want to achieve? The stability. The more they achieve that, the more they think they are winning. And so where the military attempts to enforce law and order, which is noble, every Nigerian is happy about that. But the challenge is this: because the military is not the cause of the challenge, and because the solution is not also in the hands of the military, the solution is in the hands of our political leaders, as it were, at the federal level and then at the state level. Those grievances that we mentioned, this is not the remit of this conversation to discuss those grievances, but those grievances are there, and it's the political leaders that should come up with solutions. All the military is trying to do is to provide the atmosphere for those solutions to be implemented, as it were, and it's sad that they are now the targets of attack by that population. So as an example, when I say the military's prolonged intervention in internal security, the military, as a matter of rule and policy, does not have the platforms for peace building and peace negotiations and things like that. Yes, in some instances, if you use the example of the operation in Plateau State, they've learned as a result of necessity to put forward peace building platforms. But is that happening in the Southeast? No. So as an organization, the military does not have that capacity. That capacity is embedded in other security organizations. And the earlier as a country we realize that and take back the military to its constitutional mandate, so that these other security organizations, including the police as an example, take over the responsibility for internal security. And in so be you cannot use, and I want to be very clear, for identity-based conflict, you cannot use force to solve them. For identity-based conflict. And that is what we have in places like the Southeast. There are conflicts driven by grievances, by people who feel they've not been given, quote unquote, a good share of.
So was it wrong then to have deployed soldiers to help quell,
It wasn't wrong, but my point is it should have been followed by other concurrent. So as an example, if you notice, since President Tinubu, assumed power in May 2023, June 2023, there has been the rhetorics coming from governors in the Southeast has changed. Their effort in building resilience of their people having improved, and automatically we've seen a reduction in the conflict in the Southeast. So point I'm trying to make is this has to be a whole of society approach. We cannot give that responsibility to one institution, the military. The governors have to play their role, traditional rulers have to play their role, and more importantly, the root causes of the conflict in the Southeast has to be addressed. As an example, the issue of Nnamdi Kanu, it has to be taken to a logical conclusion. If he's guilty, let the court rule and let him be penalized. If he's not guilty, he should be released. The longer he stays, the more the oxygen that drives the conflict remains.
Well, how would you then analyze the killings at Okwama? That is not non-state actor. Those are community people, and these are soldiers deployed to, to help keep the peace. And community men, if you look at the way they were ambushed and killed.
Again, that's an identity-based conflict. From, even though the details are not exactly very clear, it was two communities that were fighting. And then the military intervened to resolve that conflict. Now, what happened to our justice systems? Why should the military be involved in a inter-community conflict like that?
Why not the police?
As either the police or even our traditional justice system, which is very effective, by the way. So I agree totally with General Tenlong's statement that the collapse of social order is chiefly responsible for where we are. And you can't use force to rejuvenate social order. This is the point I'm trying to make. We have to address those root causes. Even if we make every Nigerian a military personnel and deploy every Nigerian, as long as those root causes remain, we will not find a solution to the challenge. Revamping, every time I come here, I talk about social cohesion, and I talk about what African Polling Institute does. Perhaps our political leaders need to take that report and see the root causes of the collapse of that social order, and then ask themselves, each and every one of them, what can they do to help to revamp that social order. I love what National Orientation is trying to do now. Some of what General Tenlong said, they are about to start it. Civic education will be taught in our schools at the moment, so that the instrument of the state is recognized by the young ones, and they now see that instrument of the state as helping them, and they will now also play a role to protect that instrument of the state. I want to emphasize in my closing remarks that the military is an instrument for the implementation of public policy. And the moment Nigerians realize that, because honestly, otherwise we're going back to that Hobbesian state of existence where the stronger person would find his way, more or less. And that's not what we want as a people. We must protect the military. They're there to help us.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kabir. I think we have General Temlong back now. General Temlong, can you, okay, you can hear us, right? Okay, all right. So we have been talking about the issues, several issues have been raised concerning the civil-military relations and why there were so much strain. And the major one is the issue of trust and social cohesion. And also, you mentioned the issue of communication and information, which is lacking. So how do we begin to correct all these issues?
Well, thank you very much. I think what we need to do is that we need to get everybody to understand their roles and know what they are supposed to do. The military is providing military aid to civil authority to provide the enabling environment for them to be able to operate as a government. Because there are areas that the civil authority cannot even access easily without the assistance of the security forces. Now, what we want to do is to restore that situation for people to address the root causes of their problems. And now part of these problems are, look, like I said, the breakdown of the social order. You need to build the capacity and start deliberate efforts to rebuild the social order. You need to build the capacity of the citizens on what their roles and responsibilities are to their own security and to the defense of their communities and the nation at large. Now, you need to, even the governors, I've said it and argued, and unfortunately, we have so many people out there. If you
to us today, actually. I think we're still having this network challenge.
I think we may just have to do, engage.
Have to concentrate on Dr. Kabir. Okay, we're looking at this issue of trust and other and information and communication, which you have identified. He also identified information and communication as one of the major strain in the civil relationship. So how can we address all these challenges?
Yes,
what should be done?
Earlier on, we discussed that the defense headquarters, as it were, and all the armed forces of Nigeria, they've established civil-military coordination, and your colleague has attested to the fact that she's participated in some of the engagement. I think in March or April, I was also invited to one in Asaba immediately after the Okoma incident. The military, the army, I think it was, that organized that, yes. And they invited me, and I was part of that. Your colleague Conscience, yes, was also there. So the military is doing all of that. It's trying to improve, its engagement with the public. And I remember during that session in Asaba, the military engaged actively with the media as part of the, it was a 2-day event. So that type of engagement is good. But beyond that, the strategic communication component of the government is absolutely important, and that's driven by the Office of the National Security Advisor. If you look at our national security strategy, there is a whole section on strategic communication. It identifies the media, if I remember well, in about 19 places as in our national security strategy, which means we cannot achieve the imperatives of that strategy without the media. Even those who drafted that document realized that. But sadly, and that is what pains me, all of the recommendations, most of them are not being implemented. And so there is a need for the revamping of the strategic communication component within our national security strategy. In other words, the meetings, especially within the MDAs, to discuss the direction of the government so that can be communicated to the people in a manner that the people will understand. Point I'm trying to drive is if people understand the direction of government and what government is trying to achieve, they'll probably be able to support what the government is doing better. Everything General Temlong has mentioned, I agree. Civic education is absolutely important. Our role as parents, what do we teach our children? The role of the various components that shape value system. Our schools, what do they teach the children? Media, both conventional and social. What are they portraying in terms of the patriotism? How do they see the instrument of state? What have we done after NSAS, as an example, to revamp that patriotism, especially among the younger ones? And then, of course, the role of religious institutions. Do they see the instrument of state as one that should be protected and should be respected by everyone? When clerics stay on the pulpit, do they preach patriotism? Do they preach respect for the rule of law and things like that? So all those shapers of our value system, are they in sync with what the government is trying to achieve? That is what strategic communication can help do, when you engage with each and every one of these components so that they support what you are trying to do. I think in the long run, the objective will be a win-win situation, actually. This will not only affect because we're discussing the military now. Let's not forget that the other security forces are also victims. The police, almost on a daily basis. The customs, not too long ago, I think the custom actually showed us. Then we also saw, severally, civil defense, road safety. So it cuts across, and like I said, strategic communication will go a long way towards helping that.
I remember during the period of the term of the immediate past CDS, at the time when the very significant, victory, was made over Boko Haram. In his speech, he did talk about the fact that the military needed to win the hearts and minds of, of the people. And I think, that facilitated the military-civil relations engagements. But if you look at the depth of, distrust between, public, confidence in the military, it's so bad that, it would take a lot to really, restore that confidence. Now, looking at the content and context of the military-civil relations, you have attended, I've attended, a couple of them. Do you think it's potent enough, to impact on public perception of the military? Because the military is driving it.
Unfortunately, no. The military, first off, it's a participant. And because it's a participant, there's just so much that it can do. A lot of people will see it as it's because it's a participant, that's why it's trying to do what it's trying to do. And the naysayers will still remain naysayers. So it has to be, we as Nigerians have to take ownership of that responsibility. And in this instance, our parliamentarians, because there is no arm of government that is closer to the people like the parliament. So the parliament at the federal and at the state level need to take that responsibility. And I always say this, the chief beneficiaries of our democracy are our parliamentarians. They are the chief beneficiaries. If today, God forbid, something happens, they will be the first victims. And so the onus for the protection of our democracy should be by them before any other one, even the executive arm of government.
What can they do?
Take ownership of that. So as an example, there are three roles. Legislation, as an example, in identifying the drivers or the root causes of the deterioration of civil-military relations. I identified legislative framework. So that legislative framework to ensure justice, to ensure, because in addressing the root causes of the grievances, for instance, in the Southeast, the legislature has a huge role to play. If they can address those root causes, they would have provided the military the platform to operate without being the victims or targets. Number two, they engage with their people more than any other arm of government. Most of them, of course, they were elected from either senatorial districts or legislative. Anyway, most of them have constituents. So their ability to engage is absolutely great. How do they talk to their people to explain to them that, look, you need these security agencies, just like General Tem Long has explained, to establish public order so that governance can take place. If you see the huge sums of money that is being expended on security, just last week I sat down and put together the sum for health and education in our budget. Security is more than these two critical sectors of our nationhood, and we can't continue like that. So the role of the legislature is absolutely important, both in legislation, in oversight, and then of course in budgeting. if they can look at these critical areas and enhance the public perception, as it were, of the role of our security forces, including the military, it will go a long way towards reducing the anger that the people have towards the military, which is a misplaced anger.
Okay, misplaced anger. Okay, I think it has to do with, the information and reorientation of the people. Well, we just gathered that our third guest has joined us via Zoom, Dr. Monday Michael Ashibogu. Oh, he's gone again. Oh, okay, I think we're having some technical issues.
I hope there's no connectivity strike.
I don't know.
Yes, anyway, it does happen
we're
with technology.
But at least we're happy we still have Dr. Kabil in the studio. Oh, he's back? Okay. Dr. Ashibogu, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria if you can hear us.
Can hear you. Good morning.
For joining us for this conversation, this military-civil relationship in Nigeria. Let's have your thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you for having me. I've listened to Dr. Kabir, and he's actually provided very insightful background to the issues about relationship between our military and the civil population. But I'm going to look at it from, let me call it the layman's book, which should just speak to simply the issues that are very fundamental to civil-military relationship. And that there is a need, as Dr. Kabir has said, to review our strategic communications imperatives with how the military operates with the civilian population. We've had skirmishes, this time dealing directly with command and
This morning it's not a day for network connectivity, and we'll still keep our fingers crossed that the connection will clear, and we will reach out to General Temlong and of course our last guest. But Kabiru seems to yes. Well, you seem to be the lucky.
I wanted to actually talk about this issue of accountability, because I was listening to a conversation over the weekend. And this person mentioned three key elements that are, needed, to have a peaceful military-civil relationship. And he said one would be accountability of armed forces to civilian authorities, which he found out that it's lacking. Then secondly, he said there is a social contract. There's supposed to be a social contract between military and the people, which seems to be non-existent for now. And the third one is the social trust, and the social cohesion. So how do we, resolve all these issues?
Accountability is very important.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with the premise of, whoever made that point.
Mm-hmm.
There are two levels of accountability: operational accountability, mm-hmm. and then financial accountability. And I think the military as an institution has done a lot to improve on internal accountability, and then its accountability, as it were, to the Nigerian people. There are instances, for example, when the service chiefs will reiterate, and I think that the last set of service chiefs and this current set have done that. If you even look at their goals and objectives, their mandate, they emphasize this point that they are subservient to democratic control. However, it is work in progress. The leadership will continuously reiterate that. But when it comes to the, especially the operational day-to-day activities, sometimes you see issues with regards to that. So there has to be an improvement in, I would say, the military's subservience, as it were, to the democratic institutions. Because I've played a role in the 9th Assembly, I know that there are issues there. It's not every parliamentarian that would even have the confidence to request for certain information from the military. The military will tell you that this is confidential, and
mm-hmm.
they will not share it. Mm-hmm. So until we reach that stage where the military sees the civilian as someone he can trust, We haven't reached that stage yet. And to be fair to the military, there are certain elements of our civilian governance that, frankly, their action does not even exude trust. So it's a two-way thing. On the one hand, we need to improve, and on the other hand, they also need to improve. The second point you made, can you please remind me?
The social trust contract.
Social contract. That's actually a constitutional provision. It's not. It has not so much to do with the military, but our desires as a state. There is a social contract in place which says the government must provide, for instance, security, and which says our responsibility is to be law-abiding. That's an example of the social contract. So yes, the military as an instrument of policy implementation must, as it were, support the implementation of that social contract. But that responsibility is not on it alone as an institution.
But Dr. Demo, I just have one last question, because we need to talk about labor. That's the trending
very
story.
Important.
Very, very important. But again, I would refer again to the immediate past CDS, that's General Leo Irabo. Yes. When he was there, he encouraged, a kind of partnership between the private sector, to, provide some form of platform for military civil engagement. And that paid off. Today you have some programs on radio and TV, educating Nigerians on, military civil relations. And I want to also commend Armed Forces Radio. It's doing quite well. But how can we make that more relatable, especially the military civil relations activities, relatable to the public? What role can the private sector do?
I think it's about engagement. The current crop of the service chiefs, I think they've carried on with what the immediate past service chiefs were doing. Like I told you, I was invited to one of the sessions they did, and I know they've had several sessions. If I remember well, one of the recent ones happened in either Zamfara or Sokoto, and it was specifically with the social media influencers. So a lot is going on. But for the private sector to become involved, it has to be a whole of government approach. That responsibility cannot be carried by the military alone. It has to be carried by, as the coordinating element within our national security architecture. The Minister of Defense, as an example, should play that role. Bring in the private sector. There are companies, as an example, that may take that responsibility up as their CSR,
yes, corporate
social responsibility. And then there are individuals too who on their own have organized themselves, civil society organizations. I remember in 2022, there was a lady that invited me to an activity where she honored military personnel. So all of this is absolutely very important, and I think the platform has to be provided by government for private sector to become involved. A lot of us are patriotic.
Thank you.
And we would want to see a
Thank you,
situation
Dr.
where
Kabir.
this civil-military relation.
Sorry, we have to cut you short now because of our time. We have another discussion coming up immediately after this. I want to appreciate your coming on Good Morning Nigeria to discuss with us these military civil relations. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Also, we want to appreciate Dr. Monday Michael Shibogo. Unfortunately, we couldn't get back to you because of the network issue. Thank you for joining us, at least for making the effort to join us this morning. And also Dr. Tenlong. The network has been bad, but we appreciate your contribution this morning. We apologize, we have to cut short now because we have the labor issue that we need to discuss. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. So we'll take a break now. The conversation continues. Stay with us.